So, over 400 years ago, the Kabbalists of Tzfat, Safed in English, began accepting Shabbat by reciting psalms and liturgical poems. Because the Jewish people wished to give expression to the neshama, Torah, the extra or abundant soul that one receives when observing Shabbat, this custom was accepted by all of Israel and became Kabbalat Shabbat, which literally means accepting of Shabbat, as opposed to the word Kabbalah, which means accepting of the oral tradition. At that time lived Rav Shlomo Elkabetz, who composed the wonderful poem L'Chadadi that is used to welcome the Shabbat in all synagogues. It was Arizal's custom. Ari stands for Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who was the leader of the Kabbalists in Safed, to welcome the Shabbat in the field, facing west towards the setting sun. We saw a picture of that a few months ago, about where you can see that they were standing on the mountain of one of the mountain tops of Safed, and so they would face west towards where the Mediterranean was. I'm not sure if they could see the Mediterranean or not, but basically they had this idea that because the sun sets in the west, they were able to experience that. And and the sages say also in Batra 25a that the Shekhinah is manifest primarily in the west. So that means that when, if you remember, we talked about facing Jerusalem from outside of Israel, but inside of Israel, we face Jerusalem, and inside Jerusalem, we face where the Western Wall is, because the Western Wall was the closest to the Holy of Holies. This custom was accepted in most synagogues when reciting the last stanza of the Chaladi, in which Shabbat is welcomed like a bride. The Chaladi Likrat Kala, Kala is a bride. The congregation faces west, and so unfortunately, in some synagogues today, people just face where the door is, but they don't understand that that they're not always facing west where the sun is setting. And accordingly, even when the entrance to the synagogue faced a different direction, the congregation faces west. Some have the custom to face the entrance to the synagogue, even if it is not to the west, as an expression of the idea that Shabbat is a guest that enters through the door. So that's the explanation of that custom, which I thought was a wrong custom, because sometimes Jerusalem is to your south or east or north. If you're in South Africa, it definitely is not to the west. And so that explains that idea. And so in many synagogues, Friday night services begin relatively late, and the congregation reaches the holiday after sunset in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbat, the adding on to Shabbat time. They must accept Shabbat before sunset by saying Boi Kala Shabbat Hamalka. And there was actually some versions of the Chaladi which add that last stanza, Boi Shabbat Malkata. Thus, it is best to, if after Mincha, before sunset, the Gabbai makes this declaration. And so, specifically for women, women generally accept Shabbat at candlelighting, thereby fulfilling Tosefet Shabbat in an outstanding manner, because it's 18 minutes before even sunset. A woman who regularly prays Mincha should make every effort to pray Mincha on Friday before candlelighting, for in the opinion of many poskim, after she accepts Shabbat by lighting the candles, she's unable to pray a weekday mincha because it's almost like a contradiction. B'diavad, if she did pray mincha before she lit the candles, she may rely on the lenient opinion. The lenient poskim maintain that even though she accepted Shabbat and is forbidden from doing melacha, the creative labors that are forbidden on Shabbat, still she may still pray the weekday Amida, and that's Tzitz Eliezer and also the Peninei halacha. So there's so many different laws that are related to this, but the idea is basically that women fulfill their obligation of accepting Shabbat early by lighting the candles 18 minutes before sunset, and so it's very, very beautiful. Just a reminder, we when we talked about lighting the candles, um, the custom of all women, doesn't matter what denomination or Ashkenazi, Sephardi, to Yemenite, etc., is to first light and then make the blessing, even though usually we first make the blessing and then do the mitzvah, like taking lulav and etrog or hearing the shofar. And the reason why is because by saying Asher Kidcharim Tzitavet Tzivanu La'adlik Ner Shabbat, blessed are you Hashem who sanctified us with commandments and commanded us to light the Shabbat candles. It might be considered already taking in Shabbat, and therefore we first light the candles, and then afterwards we make the blessing. There is another example like that, even for men, which is washing the hands before eating bread. So we first wash our hands, then we say the blessing, and then we wipe our hands, because wiping is part of the mitzvah, and therefore it is again the same idea, which is once we washed our hands, it's already considered as if we fulfill the mitzvah, and therefore the blessing is said afterwards. So we'll stop here and open up for questions.